Leaf chromatography, digging deeper. As we investigate the results from our leaf chromatography, in order to understand what's happening, I want to plant two questions in the back of your mind to think about as we go through this. The first is, how do plants capture energy from the sun? The second is, why can't animals? So here's a screen we've seen a number of times, and it's an example of what you might have gotten from your leaf chromatography. Remember, the first time around we did spinach or green leaf. The second time we did colored leaves that we gathered from outside. As we examine those, in order to understand the differences, we need to look more closely at light. To do that, we need to think of a rainbow. Now, we learned when we were young, Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. Well, you'll notice on this chart we have Roy G. Biv right here at the bottom on the x-axis, running from right to left: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. And it's also labeled with numbers, and the units are nanometers. And nanometers are a billionth of a meter, or a millionth of a millimeter. If you go to the ocean and you watch the waves come in, now there are times when we get big, slow rollers coming in, and there's other times where we get really choppy whitecaps. Well, if you were to get on top of any wave and have a friend get on top of the next wave, and you held a ruler, you can measure the distance from the top of one wave to the other, and we call that the wavelength. Well, just as with water waves, light can be measured in wavelengths as well. And it turns out, and if you are ever in a pool and you can test this, is make waves. Make slow, big waves, and then make really fast, choppy waves, and see which one tires you out most. You're going to find that choppy waves require more energy to make than big, slow waves, and it's that way with light as well. So these numbers across the bottom, 700 nanometers is like a long, slow wave, and it requires or contains less energy. As we move to the left through 600, 500, 400, violet, near the 400s, is like short, choppy waves. It contains more energy. Well, this energy is what plants can then use for photosynthesis. So if we go up the y-axis, we see the photosynthetic rate. In other words, how fast they conduct photosynthesis. That goes up. And when you look at the higher energy wavelengths, the line is higher than it is more in the middle. And then we'll talk about this other bump at the lower end a little bit later. To understand light colors, we have to understand what it means to be reflected or absorbed. You'll notice here in the middle it says green light is reflected. When light colors are reflected, your eye can pick them up, so you see color. So if green light were reflected, I might see that happen like a green t-shirt. When the lights are off, the t-shirt has no color. When the lights come on, that t-shirt might reflect green light back to me, and I see the color green. A yellow t-shirt might reflect, it's going to reflect yellow light back to my eye. But some light is also absorbed. So when it strikes the surface of something, the light's absorbed and it's not bounced back in high enough quantity that we actually see it. So when you look outside and you see a green leaf, you're seeing reflected green light. When you see something red, you're seeing red light being reflected. So keep that in mind as we look at each of these chemicals in greater detail. So colors that are not absorbed are reflected. We don't see the colors that are absorbed, but we do see colors that are reflected. So when we look outside and we ask what color are leaves, or what color is the ocean, or what color are clouds, or what color is black, we want to think about it in terms of reflection and absorption. It turns out that white is what we see when all spectrum colors are reflected back. Black is when all colors are absorbed and nothing's being reflected back. So when you see the ocean as blue, think about what colors are being absorbed, what is being reflected. When you see the color of your leaves, what colors are being absorbed, what colors are being reflected. When you look at your clothes, the same thing. Now in this table, or this chart, we have actually the chemical peaks labeled up here with a key. So we see chlorophyll A and B and carotene. We don't see xanthocyanins xanthophyll or anthocyanins listed on here, but this will still help us understand what's going on. These chemicals absorb this 4 to 500, 525 wavelengths really well, and they have that higher energy that drives photosynthesis. So when you have those chemicals in your leaves, you're actually capturing the chemicals that absorb sunlight, that drive all of life on Earth. Without these chemicals, plants can't photosynthesize. Without photosynthesis, there's no more food production, and there's no more oxygen production, for the most part, on planet Earth. So everything else goes away. So it's hopefully, and when you examine this activity, you think more about the implications of what you did than simply putting colors on paper. Now that we go back to the original questions, how do plants capture energy from the sun? Hopefully now you realize that it's those chemicals that you got in chromatography that allow plants to capture the energy from the sun. And why can't animals? Well, think about, do animals have these colors, these pigments, to capture energy from the sun?